but supported by Council Wakakotahi. All those parties have contributed to the study to date. Ultimately, the decision makers will be Council Wakakotahi and possibly other central government departments. But to make good decisions, we need the feedback of the community. A key consideration in the end will be affordability to council ratepayers, yourselves and others, to Wakakotahi and to wider government. Council's share of running costs is spread across all ratepayers, whether they're Tokien Ward, Liam, Picton and Kenaburu. Given the very high costs that we're talking about to repair and rehabilitate the roads, you need to consider who should pay what proportion of those costs. So we're very grateful for your attending today. We've got plenty of people on screen. Please get involved, use the chat, and Neil will take you through how to do that. And then please get involved and fill out the survey to let us know your views. The decisions are really important. So it'd be great to have your involvement. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. I'll just share my screen and I'll take you through a slideshow and just run through how we're going to run the webinar this evening. Okay. Firstly, just to introduce who we are. So you just already heard from Mark. My name's Neil Edwin. I'm the project manager for the Marlborough Sounds Future Access Study. In the room with me, I've got Steve Murrin from Marlborough Road, who's also heavily involved in the project, and Courtney McCrosty from Stantec. Unfortunately, the Mayor has had to give her apologies for this evening's meeting, but has been involved in many of the community meetings so far. Also, today's panellists, we've got Andrew Moore, Courtney, of course, Ken Clapcott, and Johanna from Stantec, and Glenn Walters, Council's Comms Manager, is also on the call as well. So what we're going to do is, firstly, I'm going to show you system information. What we've been doing so far is really working with the community and trying to unpack the options that we've been developing. I'll show you a video, which will take about 15 minutes, to take you through the options that have been developed, and also where the information on the council website is. Then I'll take you through some frequently asked questions that we've been working with the community on through the community meetings we've had so far. And then lastly, there'll be an opportunity, hopefully for around about an hour or so, for a Q&A. We have the chat enabled here, so you should be able to type any questions that you've got in the chat. You can test that as a little speech bubble in the controls for the meeting. Courtney in the room and Johanna will be able to look through those questions and then pass them off to myself or the Stantec team to try and answer them. So because of the number of people, it's not possible to share everybody's video. So as a webinar, you'll be able to type your questions in the chat, and we'll try and get through as many as we can in the hour or so that we'll have after the initial part of the meeting. And then we'll pick up many questions that aren't answered and update them on the website. So I'll just start with just telling you where we're at with the process. So this process got underway late in 2022. The whole project is around building a business case to develop a case for repairing the roads. That case will go to council, to Wakakotahi and also the other government departments to consider funding those ones. We were out in the community earlier this year and we had a webinar as well. In the last week or so, we've been out in the community with a number of meetings, and I've got some more meetings coming up this week. Some documents have been developed. I've got a couple of them here, and I've got a picture on the website there. The document here, the large one, talks about an emerging preferred option for each of the 5 areas we're looking through, and the video will explain those shortly, but also hazard adaptation pathways. But there are also other options which are in this white document that you can see on the website, which will take you through each of the options you've looked at for all the areas. So all options are on the table at the moment, and at the moment we're keen to hear from people as to how those options work for them. We have those engagement documents are on our website, and I'll show you where they are after the video. Also, we have a number of supporting documents that will give you more detail if you're interested in them. As well as the video I'm going to show you, there's another video and there's some individual videos there that you can see to help understand what we're proposing. I'll show you where the community drop-in meetings to come are. And most importantly, we've got a survey which is currently open and will be open until the 11th of July. But we really want to hear from everybody involved, wherever you are in Marlborough, if you've got property in the Sounds, if you're a business in the Sounds, to tell us how these options work for you and the cost of those options, how you feel about those as well. So we're really keen for people to complete that. We've had over 200 completions so far. So there's quite a lot of interest already. We've still got a couple of weeks till this survey closes on the 11th of July. Now I'm going to show you an options video. This takes about 15 minutes or so, but it shows you exactly what's being proposed. The reason we're doing it this way is because in the community meetings, we've not had a sit-down presentation. For those that have been to them, we've had some large boards explaining the preferred and the hazard adaptation plan. This video does the same thing. So by the end of this video, you should see exactly where we're up to in terms of what the options are. And then once we get into the questions, you should be able to see hopefully how they work for you. So I'll just change over and play the video. And this will take about 15 minutes or so. And after that, I'll rejoin and continue with the slideshow.
Kia ora, and thank you for taking the time to watch an overview of the Marlborough Sound's Future Access Study engagement. Through the Marlborough Sound's Future Access Study, engineering consultancy Stantec has used the community's feedback and technical criteria to assess a range of potential future transport options, and then propose an emerging preferred option for each of the 5 areas of the Marlborough Sounds. In this video, we'll explain how and why the study has arrived at an emerging preferred option for each of the 5 areas. We'll also explain what a longer-term hazard adaptation pathway for each of the 5 areas could look like. Adaptation is a journey, a series of steps. The emerging preferred option can be considered as the starting point of that journey. The hazard adaptation pathways would follow a significant future event that causes substantial damage to the transport network. Such an event would be a trigger for Council to assess the level of service provided by the network at that time. The estimated cost of the repairs for the 5 emerging preferred options is $160 million. We don't know yet what the cost for Marlborough's ratepayers will be, but we have estimated that using different government assistance assumptions. While we hope that the government, through Waka Kotahi, will fund much of this, Marlborough ratepayers will be asked to contribute, and that could be a significant proportion of the cost. The engagement document has information on how to calculate your potential additional rates costs based on implementing the emerging preferred options at different Waka Kotahi subsidy rates. For example, for most Marlborough ratepayers, if the land value of your property is $300,000, your additional annual rates increase could range from $213 to $523, depending on the level of subsidy from Waka Kotahi. That's why we want to hear your feedback on the emerging preferred options, the long-term hazard adaptation pathways, and the other options explained in the engagement report. Please read the engagement report and go online to fill the survey. The more information you give us, the better informed we will be about how the proposed options support a safe and resilient transport system in the Sounds. No decisions have been made yet, and your feedback on these options will help the decision makers take your views into account. Let's start in the north, with Rye Valley to Te Aumiti French Pass, including Tennyson Inlet and Rangitoto ki te Tonga de Urville Island. Currently, there are no vehicle restrictions on this route. There are sections with 1 lane only and traffic management. The emerging preferred option in Rye Valley to Te Aumiti French Pass is road access. This option indicates that restoring road access is justified, as are targeted improvements in resilience, particularly at the southern end of the study area around Okiwi Bay to State Highway 6. The route from Rye Valley to Elaine Bay would be strengthened, although the section between Okiwi Bay and Elaine Bay may have more 1-lane sections and vehicle length restrictions. The routes from Elaine Bay to Te Aumiti French Pass and Rye Valley to Tennyson Inlet would receive targeted improvements, but there would be an increase in the number of one-lane sections, and there may be vehicle length restrictions too. The road to Port Laigar and the roads on Rangitoto ki te Tonga, the Oval Island, would receive essential repairs only and experience more one-lane sections and possible vehicle length restrictions. The cost estimate for this emerging preferred option is $45 million. In the engagement report, the hazard adaptation pathway for this area is called marine access. Marine access and marine infrastructure are likely to become more important over time, especially past Okiwi Bay, due to the susceptibility of the road corridor here. There would be investment to protect and upgrade primary hub marine facilities at Havelock and Picton, Elaine Bay, which is an arterial hub, Duncan Bay, Tennyson Inlet, Sissy Bay, and Port Laigar, which are local hubs. The cost estimate for this hazard adaptation pathway is $20 million. Now let's take a look at Te Hoire Pelorus, including Kaiuma Bay Road. Currently, there are no vehicle or other restrictions here. The emerging preferred option for Te Hoire Pelorus is road focus. The option indicates that restoring road access is justified with targeted improvements in resilience, particularly at the western end of this area. However, marine access could become more important over time at the eastern end of this study area due to the susceptibility of the road corridor here. The route would receive targeted improvements. The section between Brooklyn Bay and Kaiuma Bay may have increasing one-lane sections, along with vehicle weight and length restrictions. The cost estimate for this emerging preferred option is $5 million. In the engagement report, the hazard adaptation pathway for this area is called marine access. There would be no change to existing marine services. There would be investment to protect and upgrade primary hub marine facilities in Havelock. The cost estimate for this hazard adaptation pathway is $2 million. Now moving east to Queen Charlotte Drive. Currently, vehicles longer than 12.6 metres are not permitted along Queen Charlotte Drive without a pilot vehicle. There are multiple sections with one lane only and traffic management. Anakiwa Road is open to vehicles less than 12.6 metres long. Beyond Tirimuana Jetty, only light vehicles weighing less than 3.5 tonnes are allowed, unless by prior arrangement. The emerging preferred option for Queen Charlotte Drive is road focus. While there are marine transport alternatives for the eastern end of this area, the regional importance of the 40-kilometre road link between Picton and Havelock requires a focus on restoring a reasonable and more resilient level of service. The route from Picton to Havelock would be strengthened, and Anakiwa Road would receive targeted improvements. The pre-2021 vehicle length restriction of 12.6 metres would remain between Linkwater and Picton. The cost estimate for this emerging preferred option is $30 million. In the engagement report, the hazard adaptation pathway for this area is called marine access. There is no change to existing marine services. There would be investment to protect and upgrade primary hub marine facilities at Picton and Havelock. The cost estimate for this hazard adaptation pathway is $10 million. Now let's head north to Keneperu. Currently, Keneperu Road to the heads and its side roads, including Moetapu Bay Road, are restricted to residents and emergency or essential services only. The section of Keneperu Road between Linkwater to the heads and its side roads has severe storm damage, and its entry is at resident and emergency or essential services drivers' discretion. Restrictions also apply on Keneperu and Moetapu Bay roads, and they are as follows. No camper vans, vans or buses. Only four-wheel drive and light vehicles under 3.5 tonnes. No vehicles of more than 8 metres in length are allowed on Kenepuru Road between Moetapu Bay to the Heads. The emerging preferred option for this area is balanced. This option indicates that restoring some form of road access is justified, and there is merit in some improvements, such as to stormwater and maintenance. However, over time, the Kenepuru area will become more dependent on the need for a robust adaptation plan and marine infrastructure. This is due to the likelihood of severe disruption in future due to the range of hazards and emergency events. The road between Torea and Portage would be strengthened. The roads north of the Kenepuru Heads would receive targeted improvements, although there may be an increase in the number of one-lane sections and vehicle length restrictions may be implemented. Kenepuru Road between Linkwater and Portage would also receive targeted improvements, with potential for an increase in the number of one-lane sections. Only essential repairs would be completed between Portage and the Heads, and on Moetapu Bay Road. On Kenepuru Road, between Moetapu Bay Road and the Heads, and on Moetapu Bay Road, there is potential for length restrictions to 12.6 metres and weight restrictions to under Class 1 in the long term. The cost estimate for this emerging preferred option is $60 million. In the engagement report, the hazard adaptation pathway for this area is called Marine Focus. Roads are only repaired to provide access to the nearest marine hub. There would be investment to protect and upgrade the primary hub marine facilities at Havelock and Picton, Torea and Portage, which are arterial hubs, and Double Bay, Fish Bay, and Punga Cove. A new arterial hub would be developed near Galta Bay. Local marine hubs would also be constructed as needed. Passenger services between Havelock and Kenepuru Sound would be introduced 3 times per week, and passenger services in Totaranui, Queen Charlotte Sound are as existing. A twice-weekly freight service between Picton and Torea would be introduced, as would a scheduled freight service between Havelock and Kenepuru Sound. Routes and their frequencies would be subject to consultation. The cost estimate for this hazard adaptation pathway is $40 million. And finally, our last area of interest, Te Whanganui, Port Underwood. Currently, there are no vehicle restrictions here, but there are multiple one-lane sections under traffic management. The emerging preferred option for Te Whanganui, Port Underwood is road access. Road access is preferred over marine access to help maintain the Cook Strait national power grid and telecommunication cables. Improved road resilience is justified. Compromises can be made on the road width and type, that's sealed or unsealed, over time to save money. Port Underwood Road between Waikawa and Oyster Bay would be strengthened. All other roads would receive targeted improvements, but Tumbledown Bay Road between Oromoa, Fighting Bay Entrance, and the road end may have vehicle length restrictions. The cost estimate for this emerging preferred option is $20 million. In the engagement report, the hazard adaptation pathway for this area is called Marine Access. There is no change to existing marine services. There would be investment to protect and upgrade the primary hub marine facilities at Picton and the Oyster Bay local hub, and a new hub could be developed near Hakana Bay. The cost estimate for this hazard adaptation pathway is $10 million. So now, we want to invite you to tell us, what do you think of the transport options? You may live in the Sounds, own a property or business in the Sounds, be a visitor, or a Marlborough ratepayer. By July 11th, we want to hear how these options will affect you. Your feedback will contribute to Waka Kotahi and Council's decision-making for a viable future transport network in the Sounds. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Mā te wā.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I hope that was interesting for you. Some of you may have seen that information already. I'll just continue through the presentation. I see we've got some questions coming through. Please do keep sending them through on the chat. Once I've completed my part of the presentation, then we'll get to your questions and try and answer them as best we can. Just start sharing my screen again. Okay, I will now take you through what information is actually on the council website at the moment, because it isn't just those videos. We've got a range of other information that you may not have seen. So I'll just show you how to find that information. And there's a range of there. So I'll just hold them a second. I'll just share that screen now. Okay, this is the council homepage and our website. Many of you may have seen this before. So it's marlborough.govt.nz is our web address, marlborough.govt.nz. From the homepage, if you just scroll down, keep going down on the bottom left, you see the Marlborough Sounds Future Access Study. You click on that, it'll take you to the public engagement part of there. So there's a range of information in here, so I'll take you through it one at a time. Firstly, we've got the engagement documents. So the main booklet, which we've published, and for those who have been to the community meetings, you should be able to see those, is available here, which is the first document here. And then the other options booklet. So the video took you through 2 options for each of the 5 areas. There were a further 3 developed as well. You can see those on the other options. We're interested in your feedback on all of the options. For those interested in more information as well, there's some background information which you might find interesting. The economic analysis, geology assessments, the strategic case, which is a document we're developing as part of the process. And finally, a stakeholder presentation that we held last week in Blenheim. That just shows you a slideshow that we showed those people who came along to that event. Secondly, there are the videos that you've just seen. So there's an introductory video, which I didn't show, which is 5 minutes, followed by the 15-minute video, which you've all just watched. And then if you're just interested in one of the areas, we've broken them down into shorter videos as well. So you can just select the video that you're interested in, or videos that you're interested in if you don't wish to watch the whole one. Next, we directed you to the online survey. So if you click on that link there, it takes you to a website where you can complete the survey. And this is really important for everybody participating in the process to try and complete this to indicate how the options impact you and also how it costs you as well. And finally, the public drop-in session. So some of you may have attended these already. We held 4 last week. So this is our 5th of the 8 events. Then we have 2 tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Rye Valley at the Meadows Rest, and at 3 p.m. for those living in Nelson at the Trafalgar Centre Northern Extension, but they're between 3 and 5. And finally, on Wednesday, we're going to Paul Marlborough Brilliant in Picton. We've already held events in Blenheim, Waiteria Bay, French Pass, and Linkwater. So that's the information you can find on our website. Do please have a look around there. There's quite a lot of information available there. So I'll just encourage you to have a look at that. Just return to our PowerPoint. I'll take you through a few frequently asked questions that we've developed as part of having their discussions with the community. So these are some of the things we've heard, the questions we tried to answer out there. and we'll keep adding to these. And any questions we get asked today, we'll try and answer those as well. So firstly, people have asked what essential repairs mean. That's some you would have heard in the video there. So as you can see, it's the damage that impacts the carriageway, and should there not be damage on that part of it, then there's no repair needed to be undertaken. But generally, the strategy is to make repairs. It could involve retreating the road away from the hazard or making the road narrower where this is done safely to reduce cost and improve resilience where feasible. It may also result in the carriageways being reinstated in gravel if it's currently sealed. So there's 500 kilometres of roads out there. For simplicity, we've tried to use similar terms across the areas, but some of the repairs may be quite different in each of those areas. But generally speaking, it's to try and keep the road open, but it may be a different road to what you're used to, something different to what was there before the storms took place. Next, the question around what happens when there's more events that take place. So at the moment, we're proposing to repair the roads following the recent events, and to continue to repair them to that level of service. But as the report will indicate, there are events that could and will take place, which could involve earthquakes, tsunamis, storm events, sea level rise, and others. We don't know what they are, and we don't know when they're going to take place. So it does depend on what the nature of the event is, and of course where it takes place. The 2021 event was more localised. Last year's event was quite widespread, so we had damage across the whole of the Sounds. If we have a large damage event that affects a particular area, the council at the time will need to look at what that event is and whether or not we need to adapt from the preferred level of service we've talked about, if that's something we can fund, to what we've called hazard adaptation pathway. We can't decide that now, because it depends on what the event is and what the impact is of that event. So, for example, a large earthquake can be a very significant widespread event. A storm event can be very localised. So where we can build in resilience cost effectively, the proposal is to do this with the level of repair we're talking about, so there is less damage in the future. But of course, events are very different, so we really need to see it till the events take place as to what we were able to do after that takes place. People have asked us what does targeted improvements means. So improvements are focused on improving resilience of the transport system. So this whole study has been around trying to make the network as resilient as possible. So we're targeting investments and improvements where there's good return in return for doing so. So, for example, if there's a large global instability issue, which means there's a general unstable land around a particular area, a small localised improvement to a particular part is unlikely to make the whole area more resilient. For those of you that obviously travel long distances down those roads, where possible, you need to try and keep those whole roads open. So in some areas, we're looking at targeted improvements to try and make sure that areas are more resilient, but localised may not be able to achieve them. So we've looked at what impact instability has had on the option development. So for those that have been to the meetings, we've developed a map, which is a small picture there, and I'll be able to show a large picture soon, where there's some areas which were natural instabilities that took place before people were there. And then some of the the instability, the red areas, are because of things that people have done, be it roads, road tracks, different land use activities in those areas. It may be possible to treat some of those areas where it's man-made, but for those areas that are naturally unstable, it's very difficult to make those areas secure in the long run. So the actual local situation of instability in the Sounds is something we need to consider what that area is like on the geology. As I say again, it's a very large area we're talking about. We'll show that map shortly. People have asked us, what does the balanced approach mean? So some areas are very vulnerable to future storm events, and it's difficult to minimise those risks in those areas. So consequently, the strategy acknowledges the challenges being able to improve the resilience of the road and looks to strengthen alternative routes to make, alongside making essential repairs to roads. Because the Sounds has water and is the primary alternative route available in most areas, the balanced approach means both looking at the roads but also looking at the marine access, because we are able in some areas to provide a marine access as an alternative. And of course, in the long run, the event of the initial response to an event, but also the long run as well, it may be the best way to maintain access in the future if the road isn't able to be repaired. As I said earlier, we just don't know what those events are in order to be able to make a decision about how serious it is for that particular place shouldn't have been. Okay, so that's some of the FAQs. I see we've had a number of questions come in. So what I'll do now, I'll stop sharing. I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves, and then Courtney is in the room with me, and Johanna will be able to help to feed the questions through, and the right person will be able to answer them. So I'll just stop sharing my presentation. So firstly, could I ask Andrew, could you perhaps take your camera and come off mute and introduce yourself to everybody, please?
Could I? Yep. I'll just see if I can. Apologies, I don't seem to be able to switch my camera on, Neil.
That's fine.
But it's Andrew Morn here from Stantec. I'm leading the project team from Stantec's on Stantec's behalf.
Thank you. And Ken?
Good evening, everybody. Ken, I'm civil geotechnical engineer, part author of the hazard susceptibility report. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Johanna? You're muted, Johanna.
Technology. Hi, I'm Johanna. I'm helping with the communications and engagement, and I am also with Stantec.
Finally in the room with us, we have Courtney.
Hi everyone, my name's Courtney. I am the business case writer for this project.
Thank you, Courtney. I've already introduced Steve and Mark as well in the room here. So perhaps I could pass over to Courtney or to Johanna to perhaps feed through the first question.
So first question on the list that we received, I think we may have covered off, but it was just with regards to kind of put what does a lower level of service mean? And at what point would we potentially be losing services such as multi-lines and stuff like that?
Okay, perhaps well, Steve, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, that is actually what what we're intending to do with the Kennebrew is reinstate a road back in there. We're not going to do it essential repairs only. So that means where a fault has affected the carriageway, that will be undertaken. If the faults are outside the carriageway, some of the slips above the road, some of the where we lost the outside edge, but it hasn't come back as far as the carriageway, those repairs probably aren't going to be undertaken at this stage. Looking to the future, we don't know what those future events are going to be and what they're going to do. So that decision will need to be made at that time. Whether after an event it is repairable, or whether we need to start moving to the adaptive pathways, which is the more marine access.
And in respect of the question around the other services, that's Samantha. So the example asked was around mobile lines. It's for mobile lines to decide what they're able to do, and they have certain legislation that governs the service they have to provide to their customers. So that's not something we're directly involved in, but mobile lines have been involved in the discussions as part of this business case. They've indicated how important the road is to them in order for them to be able to maintain their network. And as Steve said at the beginning, the initial plan is to restore access throughout the Kennebrew. There's some areas where it's more difficult to do that, so the level of service isn't quite the same. But the intention is for a fully open road, perhaps with some restrictions on certain heavier vehicles, some narrower sections, some different services, but for that full road that everybody, not just residents, is able to use. Andrew or Ken, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I wonder, it's Andrew here, I wonder, Steve, if you'd like to expand in terms of, we talked about the level of service relating to the types of vehicles that are able to use some of those roads. So, and doing some of the repairs, if the roads are narrowed, where we can do narrow the road safely, it might also mean, however, that some longer vehicles may need to be piloted in some areas. But Steve, would you like to just expand on the levels of service are primarily talking around types of vehicles and the types of surfacing, but we are looking at reinstating a road. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, that's correct, Andrew. All the design we're doing for the repairs on the Kennebrew Road will take what we call 70.9 truck and trailer unit. So the average stock truck will be able to access the road. The issue is we're going to have a lot of one-lane sections, and there's also going to be some corners that are probably a truck and trailer can make the corner but won't be able to stay within the same lane. So the intention is that we will probably have a 12.6 metre length restriction on that road, and if a longer vehicle, so that truck and trailer of 17 odd metres, does need to access that road, it will need to be piloted. We're not quite sure what the weight restrictions are going to be at this stage until all those repairs are done, but there's likely to be a weight restriction on the vehicles that are allowed on that road in the future.
And just to add to that, should you download the report or have a copy of it, page 30, base of the Kinabrew describes different sections of the road and the proposed restrictions on weight limits in there. So that's true for all of the areas with the emerging preferred option, what those restrictions might be. Girls, question?
Next on our list was some concern over the hazard adaptation pathway, having hazard adaptation pathway recommendations being made now after storm events over the past 25 years. Just I think a bit more explanation around why we're taking this long-term view now.
Perhaps I'll start off with that and then I can hand over to the team. So the view has been that we'd like to provide some certainty to the community. So we'll think that there's, events have taken place and there may be future events. And because those events could be significant in terms of the impact on the road, we want to indicate that where possible, we try and maintain that access. But if it's not possible, what level of service might be applied at that future time. Again, it very much depends on those events. So we don't know when they're going to happen and we don't know how they're going to happen. So that's the intention behind the hazard adaptation pathway in general. Steve, Andrew, might add anything to that before I hand over to Andrew? Also, Eddie, there's probably said that. Andrew, you want to comment on that?
Look, I think you've covered that well, Neil. It is really to provide certainty of what access might be in the future, and we could envisage a substantial event might happen in the future that has a much bigger impact on some parts of the road network because of their natural instability than what the recent storms are, in which case it could take many, many years for a proper road access to be restored, and in which case we need to have a form of access provided, but we also acknowledge that they would have a significant impact on people in the sounds. So it's obviously not a preferred option. It is really a backstop option if some major events happen in the future bigger than what have happened to date.
Thanks, Andrew. I do know the comment around maintenance. That's been certainly mentioned across the meetings that we've had both out in the community earlier this year and in our meetings that we held last week. So we have had conversations with people when they've raised that, and obviously the large road network is expensive to maintain. But we have certainly those will be some comments around maintenance. So please, if you wish to make comments in the survey around that, that's absolutely fine. So there's opportunities to raise that in the survey there. Thank you. Next question, please.
Next on our list is asking for a cost breakdown between the road focus option and the road access option for Fridge Pass, and what that breakdown is between Longa Valley to Fridge Pass versus Wardy Valley to Tennyson Inlet. I think, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but we won't have that information available to hand right now.
No, we don't. Not in terms of the cost differentiation.
So is that something we could perhaps look at providing some more detail offline with that one, Andrew?
Yes. I guess the process that we've gone through is we've done some high-level estimates to see the relative costs of the different options, and we are just now, as we're getting feedback from the community and stakeholders, refining that emerging preferred option and doing a cost estimate for the next stage of the business case. So I guess, Neil, that's something we can talk about offline as to what we can provide.
We'll try and provide more detail where we can, but we don't have that information available today, Leanne. But thanks for your question.
Cool. Next on our list was just some clarity around Waikapu Bay Road and what is proposed for Driftwood Corner and Alfred Point with regards to the repairs and timing.
Yes, I can answer that. Both of these faults are deemed essential repairs, so they are to be repaired. Driftwood Corner, the option we're probably going to go with there is a retreat and retaining wall on the outside edge. Alfred Point, as you'd be aware, is a massive slip above the road. There's a lot of unstable material still hanging up there. So again, it's probably going to be bring that unstable material down, drag a bench at the bottom to try and prevent stuff spilling out onto the road. Now, we are not going to be able to do those essential repairs until funding is, we're certain that we are going to get funding. In the meantime, we will maintain those sites the best we can to make sure we have access through. But yeah, the repairs won't be completed until the funding has been guaranteed.
Thank you.
Sorry, just making sure I'm in the right place. Next question is from Michelle, and it's if there's any consideration being given to more enabling planning provisions for moorings in the MEP.
I can answer that. We haven't gone into that in any depth, but any plan change process will have to be followed. So that will involve a consultation with our communities and with iwi. But certainly if we do see a need for a lot more moorings, large sites, a lot more walls and jetties, it would be desirable to consider our current planning regime and whether it can be more enabling. So it's a good question, and it's something that we will look at.
Cool. Next on our list was just some clarity around, particularly for Kinapuru, the emerging preferred option and the hazard adaptation pathway. This question specifically relates to how do we access their properties from a marine transport passenger service drop location.
Yes, I mean, I'll start with that. So, as we said, the emerging preferred option and some of the other options is looking to maintain full access without the need for having to use a marine option. In respect of the marine focus option, which is the hazard adaptation plan for the Kinapuru, the purpose of that study is to create road points that would enable access to marine points. So it would get you to a marine point for you to be able to join a barge or water taxi in order to be able to get to where you want to go. So it is the function of the marine access one is to try and get you to that point from your property. Andrew or Steve, I don't know if you'd want to add anything to that. Andrew?
No, I think, again, it's going to depend on the event that's caused us to go to that pathway. The concept is a hub and spoke concept, as Neil's outlining, provide sufficient road access to get to those marine points. It's not going to, in that circumstance, be a through road, so likely the standard of the road will likely be a lower standard, for example, more likely to be gravel roads in that instance too. So more focused on getting to those marine points. Ken or Steve, you may have additional comments you might want to make.
Steve doesn't. Ken, you got anything you want to add?
Yep.
Thank you, Jen. Cool. Next question is relatively easy. Just to please confirm that repair of the water tank slip and the portage slip are classified as targeted improvements.
They are, yeah. But both those faults will be fixed up. Yeah.
So they're sort of essential repairs, so they will be done regardless.
Yeah.
Next question from Leanne is, has any emerging or innovative technology been considered, such as the use of sea gliders that Northland have recently signed up to address similar problems that we're having here?
Andrew, perhaps you could comment on that in terms of the business case, please.
No. I guess in terms of the overall strategy, though, the first is that we're looking to repair the roads. The second is we're looking to improve the resilience where it makes sense to. And the third is improve the alternative access where there's a high risk of road outages. So in terms of timing, it's likely that repairs would be done first. Improvements might take a bit longer, and getting that marine infrastructure in place might take a bit longer again. Particularly the marine infrastructure will require more engagement with the community and the users and the water transport operators. And I guess over time, as that is worked through, some of those options that you've raised there may be brought up by the water transport operators.
Yeah, and again, this is something where we've seeked people to provide comment in the survey. So please, ideas such as this are also useful to us as well. So do include that in the feedback.
Cool. Next on our list is will Motaku Bay Road be open to the general public?
Pretty much the same as Skinner Road. There's once we've got enough repair to do and done on those roads to say be open. It is likely to be some time yet, and we'll need to get the funding here first before we're going to take a lot of those repairs.
Oh, so contingent on funding. Will the council be taking over responsibility for water infrastructure or wharves at locations identified for water access?
The assumption in the study is that council is investing in the infrastructure, the landside infrastructure necessary. The way that could be funded is in the study is rates, but it may not necessarily need to be rate funded. So there is a piece of work needed around funding options for marine access and marine services.
Cool. Next question is, I think, just a clarification that does water access for Port Liga mean Bullwater? Access to Port Liga is a private road. It isn't maintained by locals. Will council take over the maintenance of this road? I think we'll maintain current council roads, and we probably mean Bullwater, not Port Liga.
You would do.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So the intention there would, if this goes ahead, then we'd speak to that community about how we get access to that marine facility.
They're seeking feedback on the location, that they don't fix these marine access points. Their suggestions in the study, but there will be, again, further feedback on other options that may be more suitable. Also, is also welcome too.
Cool. Next, we've got another question from Leanne. Given that there are a number of building and construction projects underway in the Sounds, and this requires a number of huge vehicles, does council have any more detail regarding weight restrictions and what alternative access routes may be?
So do you think other than the Kenepuru Road, there is no restrictions? Open quotas to Class 1 can access those roads. There is weight restrictions on the Kenepuru Road between Linkwater and the Heads. Corporate trucks, building trucks can still access the outer Kenepuru and outer Sounds by barge into Fish Bay. For that section between Linkwater and the Heads, we're having difficulty getting heavy vehicles in there at the moment.
And what are the alternatives? I mean, again, there is still a water network available in some areas as well. So the barge is operational. So in the short term,
from the outer Sounds, it is quite restricted. We can probably get heavy vehicles as far as Mahau, but between Mahau and the Heads, it is pretty restricted at the moment to be able to get heavy vehicles in there.
So it depends where you are.
Yes.
And if you have a look at the engagement document for each area for the emerging preferred option, it will detail what, if any, the vehicle length and weight restrictions will be for particular road segments, if you're interested. Next on our list, it appears that most of the costing has been allocated to MDC, Wakatahi and ratepayers. How should tourists be included into these costs? And will commercial users be rated or charged?
Then at the moment, council's funding options are quite limited. So, for example, we've had suggestions that you could have toll roads. Toll roads can only be provided if there's a free alternative, and in sounds there is no alternative road. That's free. In fact, there's no alternative road. So we are limited in our options. Tourists at the moment therefore can't be told. There isn't a mechanism to do it. They are told to use the roads just as any other road user can. So that does limit things at the moment.
It'd be better for government to try and...
Yes, the central government should pursue, and they would have to change the current legislation around toll roads to enable that. There can be targeted rates, of course, on different areas, on different land uses, rather than the whole of Marlborough ratepayers paying. The costs could be targeted into specific areas, so that's the main degree of flexibility that we've got at the moment. There could be more user pays approach for marine access options, and that's, as I said earlier, that's something that will need to be considered at a future time.
And the vehicles part of that question. Is there a mechanism to be able to do that?
So the targeted rating may be able to be applied to heavier vehicles, but they also pay the road user charges, and it's another complicating factor.
Well, another question we just got, funding tangential, is when is funding likely to be guaranteed?
So I'll start with that one. So just in terms of this project for the roading, the process is we've been needing to do the business case in order to access what the Kotahi funding. This sharing of the options and seeking comment of that is one of the final stages of developing the business case, which we expect to be completed by about August, as the survey closes in mid-July. So time that's analysed and a bit more work is done, we should be looking at August. What the Kotahi need first to consider the business case, and we need to know what their level of subsidy will be before we know what the impact is on Marlborough ratepayers. So the engagement document gives scenarios of 0% subsidy, 51% subsidy, and 71% subsidy. And in the example shown in there, if you had a land value, not property value, of $300,000, the impact per year on a ratepayer by the end of this decade would be between $230 and about $500 per annum. So we don't know yet what the level of subsidy will be. Once we do know that, we will then be able to consult with our ratepayers, which we have to do for large areas of expenditure and change to levels of service. We have to do a formal consultation with our ratepayers. So we'll be much more definite about what we're proposing in terms of the actual preferred option then, based on the level of subsidy we're able to get, and also what the impact will be per property based. And our property is based on land values, our rounding charges. So we'll be able to show all of our ratepayers, not just in the Sounds, but everywhere in Marlborough, what the impact will be on them. That process usually takes 2 or 3 months. People have about 5 weeks by law to be able to do a written submission. They then can ask for oral submissions. They can come and speak to our council and speak to their submission as they wish. It's a very similar process to our annual plan, a long-term plan. And at the end of that process, the councillors will be able to make a decision as to what they're able to afford, and then what the Kotahi hopefully will be able to confirm their investment once they know the council can make it. That's not a quick process. So as I said, we expect to be later this year what the Kotahi will get to theirs, and then our process will be at the end of this year and into next year. So it could be as late as this time next year before we know for sure what funding is going to be available, at which point we'll be able to get underway with the works and the design works to do the repairs. That's not going to be what people want to hear. But in order to access government funding, we have to go through the business case process, and we have to get what the Kotahi's indication of what funding they're able to provide in order for us to be able to tell our ratepayers what the cost will be to them. Anything to that, Mark? Was that else should do? Yeah. That's a long response. How's that start? What you found?
Cool. And next question is probably in regards to safety on the roads. Generally boils down to sometimes people don't drive to the conditions, and that some corners may not be as well signposted as they would be on state highways. And when people get onto the rural roads, they speed up expecting the same level of warning and there's no policing. How do council plan to address this hazard, particularly in areas where we are looking at reducing lane widths?
Prior to last year, basically the default speed limit on a rural road in New Zealand was 100k, and councils had great difficulty about implementing lower speed limits other than in built-up areas. And that all changed last year with the introduction of the speed management rule. Council are currently going through the process of reviewing their speed management. It's actually out for consultation at the moment, but most of the sounds will have speed limits between 40 and 80k, depending on the route. And that will be implemented over the next few years. Regarding signage, that is really dependent on the hierarchy of the road. State highways are a lot higher, get a lot higher use in the council roads, and yes, all the hazards are signposted. When it gets to low volume council roads that take very low volumes, it is difficult to provide signage that delineates you to the same standard. But as we go through and do these repairs, there is single lane sections that haven't been in there in the past. All these new changes will be adequately line marked and signposted.
So, next step. Next on our list is, the long-term retreat marine focus has an action pathway options. May reduce property values in some areas, particularly Kinapoo. Will there be compensation for property owners lost in value?
Not at present. We, Treasury Council, could not afford to pay compensation to property owners for loss in value. And that would be an issue for government. And as you've seen from Cyclone Gabriel, and the legislation, specific legislation for the North Island areas, government is suggesting a shared compensation scheme, but some councils have already said that that's not affordable to them. So it's a very challenging issue, and it will require discussion with government and assistance from government to consider compensation.
The Gabriel legislation doesn't apply to what happened in Marlborough. So
No, it doesn't.
And that would also require another piece of legislation for other parts of New Zealand that are going through this situation, either now and in the future.
Could I just clarify something too? I've seen before about target rates on heavy vehicles. I should have said on the land use that may mean you need to use heavy vehicles. So target rates can be applied to locations and they can be applied to land uses. So if you have a forestry block or a farm, that it is possible to differentiate rates based on the likely use of the roads as a result of that land use. I hope it explains it.
It's that what to be proposed. That's part of that consultation we were talking about lately, early next year, as to who pays. If such proposals were to be made by council, then that would be something that would be subject to consultation. Because obviously it affects those people particularly, and they need the right to be able to comment on that.
Yes, and we want your comments on those sort of ideas now if you've got views on it.
Cool. Next on our list is, are there any assurances for communities on what these essential repairs are and will they be maintained into the future?
Well, that was answered in the FAQs earlier on. If a fault does encroach into the carriageway, then it's regarded as essential repair and will be fixed.
Nice. With regards to marine access and upgrades to existing marine infrastructure, has there been any discussions with local marine transport companies regarding increases in services and cost estimates of providing this increased service?
So there's two issues here. So one is the current service that's been provided now, and we're just working on the subsidy arrangements for that. We've hoped to continue that subsidy for at least one more year. But in respect to the business case for this piece of work, that's more about long-term marine access. So we have certainly spoken to local marine transportation providers. They're providing suggestions to us both about services and locations and future infrastructure requirements as well. So that is something that we have talked to them about. One of the challenges is at the moment, marine isn't generally subsidised by Waka Kotahi in the long run. They're providing the subsidy at the moment. So who pays for any future subsidy of those marine services still needs to be determined. And that will be one of the questions that Waka Kotahi will be asked as part of the business case process later this year. And if it's not subsidised, again, we'll need to find other ways which that can be funded. So it's not an easy answer, but at the moment, it's not something they generally fund across the country.
Cool. As part of his adaptation plan, will additional marine hubs be included? For example, one in Motapu Bay. Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier, we are open to suggestions on that. So if there's not a marine hub in a place where you think it should be, please do indicate that. In terms of how we would access it in the future, that I mentioned, Steve, will be part of the discussions. If this option, again, these are still options at the moment, but if this becomes the option that's funded, of course, we need to work out with that community if something's in place in order to how that can be accessed, as we would maintain that in the future. Do you want to add anything to that? It's also proposed at the moment, isn't it? It's covered, yeah, or would it address it when it happens? And
Andrew here, agreed, and Ken could probably talk to more detail on it, but essentially it would depend on the event, depend on the need. And I think Motapu is something that is an area we had identified that there may be need to be an additional marine facility there if a significant event occurred. But Ken, would you like to just quickly highlight the strategy there around how marine hubs and locations might be identified and planned for in the future?
Sure. I suppose first off, we're not pushing anyone to the hazard adaptation pathway. We're just highlighting it. It's going to be nature that pushes us there, but there's no reason why we can't start preparing for it now. So this is starts with communities starting to think where potential local hubs might want to be and what type of facilities we might want to have at these hubs. And then I suppose when nature does come, we're a little bit more prepared. But in the end, an earthquake, especially, or storm event may truncate a road, which effectively makes a piece of land an island. So you're going to need a marine hub to get into that, hub and spokes model, that series of roads. I suppose when we are considering these sites, we also have to look at the resilience. There is probably a site or two currently where we've got marine hubs that have got similar, or if not worse, hazard susceptibilities to sections of our roads. So that will be also an important consideration. Cheers.
Jenny?
Cool. Just a comment around parking at Havelock and Picton already being stressed during summer, and that marine focused and a more marine focused approach would require additional parking capacity here.
Yeah, so we have talked to Port Marlborough, who operate the ports at Havelock and Picton, and we are continuing to do that. So we've recognised, you may have seen it in the video where we talked about strengthening and upgrading those ports. That is certainly going to be a factor as to what infrastructure is going to be required at those ports to enable people to make their onward journeys and also to move goods in and out. So this is going to be something that we still need to do more work on. And again, please do make comments around that in the study. But we don't have answers to every situation at the moment. But we are certainly aware that that's a factor that needs to be considered. Of course, some people who already have road access only are able to currently have to make arrangements in that area. So it may also assist those people to in getting their way around.
Cool. We've had a question around what a local marine hub actually looks like, specifically the question was around Duncan Baits and Sun Inlet. But just what does our indicative local marine hub look like? And will any funding be made available for the current community boards who run them if they do?
The first part of that question sounds like a question for Ken.
Sure. Every community's got different needs. So, when we start planning out these local marine hubs, the first part of it is consultation and getting around and discussing what does the community need at the hub. And then going on from there. Neil's conveniently walked out of the room. I was going to pass it back to him right now.
I think if you have a look in this document here, the engagement document towards the back, I can't remember the exact page, but it will give you a high-level overview of what we were picturing when we were thinking of local marine hubs. Obviously, it will vary depending on location, but it gives you an indication of what we were thinking about.
I'll just jump in here too, Courtney. There's another question about petrol pumps at marine hubs. A part of our study, at a high level, we've looked at lifeline facilities, comms, power, petrol. And that's part of the strategy in terms of targeted improvements at primary hubs like Havelock, Picton, and I suppose even arterial hubs such as Elaine Bay. We're requesting funding to look at how resilient is these petrol supplies. So, if we go into a marine transport system, we understand that vessels will have to be powered by fuel, and making sure that, say, after an earthquake event, that these fuel systems are resilient and can be up and running as soon as possible, as people will need to use marine transport. Over and out.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And his question is possibly a bit larger than this, but is apart from storm events, is our current situation also a result of under-investment over the years?
Yeah, it's a challenging question. You can look around the country at recent storm events, and it's easy in hindsight to say New Zealand should have invested billions more dollars in river control and roading networks. But there is a limit to what is affordable at any one time, and communities, governments have made decisions to build to a certain level of service. There is always a possibility that those levels of service aren't good enough when a force majeure event like we had comes along. So you can't design for, there's a limit to the level of service that you can afford, is what I'm saying. And, it's hard to foresee where that future event might take us in terms of the severity of storm events. But I guess what we're assuming in the study is that climate change is occurring, and the resilience of those networks will be tested in time, and hence we have to have an hazard adaptation pathway. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's not one that where there's a clear answer.
Cool. Next is a query around the passenger and freight services proposed under the marine options, and whether or not they're really feasible, given the volume of passengers and freight expected for this area. Yeah.
Sandra or Ken, you could respond to that.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I guess that comes to the point earlier around where the funding for those services come from as well. So if there's a greater demand or a lower demand, what's an economic level of service that can be provided? And I don't think there's any question that if it was just marine access, that probably the character of the way that people live and operate in the Sounds is going to change. So it's going to be quite different. And I think the economic impact assessment that was done for the study reached the conclusion that the economic activity under that sort of environment would be significantly less than what it is with roads. So that's not a going to that hazard adaptation plan is I guess it's a really last stop. It's not somewhere where we want to go to. It's really just to say that there is an option for access into the future if the, I guess, unthinkable but possible happens. And yeah, I think economically, the way that it's been looked at is that would be a cost impact on the people who live in the Sound. So that would probably make some businesses or make it unsustainable for people, a number of people or businesses to continue in the Sounds in the way that they are now. So that is, I guess, a big reason as to why repairing the roads has been the preferred option. But yeah, I'm not sure if that fully answers the question there. But I think it's a good question around the economic sustainability of those types of services in the future.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Next on our list is just a query around, will there be a guarantee that the funds will go where they've been promised? There's been damage on our roads from 2021, and yes, they're still damaged.
It was a significant investment in all roads that were damaged. It's just that for some areas we haven't invested as much because of the hazards that we identified. Steve might want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so following the first event, we did have to redirect some of that funding to deal with the hazard we would encounter in the August event. The estimate we put together is basically looking at each route, and the funding would go to each route, and unless another event happens, and we may need to look at we adapt that as well. But the intention would there would be funding for each route, and those repairs on those roads would be undertaken.
Look, Fadi, I'm not entirely sure I've understood your question, but if I've got it wrong, please add another comment and we will try again. But your question is in relation to perhaps giving a targeted user pay rates for marine access and road access as opposed to a blanket rate change across the region.
I think we partly addressed that earlier. So in terms of roads, I think Mark's already outlined that we don't really have a mechanism to charge tolls as the way the law stands at the moment. So MBC can't charge for road access in different ways to what it does at the moment. In terms of marine access, obviously there is a charge on users at the moment. The level of charge on marine access in the future would be something that would have to be considered as part of the funding package. And as I said earlier, we don't yet have subsidies from Wakatani in the long term for marine access, but they have provided it in the short term. So part of the restriction we have is around what we're able to charge. Council's video rates as a mechanism to charge, and we cannot charge for toll roads. So that does rather restrict our ability as our organisation to do that. It would require a change in the national legislation to enable that. One should say also we are talking to other government departments around this, so there is a possibility that other government departments could contribute towards these costs. It may be for particular parts of the solution. So we aren't just looking at what the Totani, we are looking at wider government contribution as well. For those who have seen the news in recent months, there's lots of regions that are also struggling, and government's under quite a lot of pressure for funding. So Marlborough is one of many that are looking for funding at the moment for these events, and I'm sure there'll be others in the future.
Thank you. Just got a question that there are currently limitations on lorries, etc., in Tennyson Inlet. How do we plan to manage this going forward, or do we plan to open more areas for access?
You just earlier.
Yes, and we will need to look at our resource management plan and any current difficulties that there might be in putting out new warrants with sites and duties. So it's something we haven't really had a hard look at yet, but we'll actually consider.
We've got a couple of questions around maintenance. Do you want close or? Yeah, okay, cool. In the past, it's been possible to have maintenance completed on our roads. Will this be improved in the future?
See from the guardians.
Well, there's always the argument is we had done enough maintenance of those roads. We're asking as part of the survey for your feedback on whether you think the maintenance levels have been correct or whether they should be increased. We do have some ideas, but yeah, more maintenance actually costs more money. So these are all the things we need to consider and take through to the next stages.
Cool. Let's do. Yeah, is there any clarity around what standard of repair might result in a gravel surface going forward, and what standard will be maintained as a sealed road?
Yeah, a lot of those decisions haven't been made as yet. I guess where there's a sealed road now, the intention would be to try and keep with that seal, unless the expense of keeping it sealed does get too high, and they probably would need to make a decision that, but maybe we pull back on the seal. And also the stability and geology of the area, if it's going to keep moving, it probably won't be sealed. It's a lot easier to smooth up a road with a grade and a couple of truckloads of gravel than it is once it gets sealed. So if the area is very unstable, it's not needed, then it will revert to a gravel road.
Cool. Cheers. Got a question around if we do have something else happen in Father Sketch rerouted, will ratepayers get a say?
And a council in future will have to look at levels of service. So, and keep looking at we're always looking at levels of service. So, what happened after the July 2021 event? We did have money approved. When we had the August 2022 event, which was far more serious, it became clear that some areas were much less resilient than others. And so we had to consider what's the best use of our funds, because our funds are limited. So we did change direction at that point. However, this study is all about taking into account those resilience factors and directing money at the right level of service into both the riskier areas and the less risky areas. So we would hope that the outcomes of the study and the decisions that are made can be stuck to by future investment, because we've undertaken a good process.
Thank you. And this is the last on my list, assuming I haven't missed anything. And that's just be with me for a section. The geotech assessment shows areas with better soil types or stabilities than others. But this doesn't seem to be reflected in the proposed options going forward.
I think this is around, so Andrew and Ken could probably answer this, but I think this question relates to, there's a range of factors that we looked at in developing the options, including geotech, but it wasn't solely geotech, but perhaps Andrew and you could provide more detail about the factors that contributed to the colours, if you like, of those different sections of road.
Ken, if you can talk to that one, just around the how you develop the strategies for the segments within the areas.
Development strategies. It was not just the geology. When we look, first it was just the segmentation and the breakdown. I was trying to look at the hierarchy of roads, the level of use, etc. What's the current state of them, and then when we looked at how the different roading approaches, what am I trying to say here? It started off with the current state and how they potentially could be changed. And as Andrew Neil was saying before, it was just not the geo susceptibility that fed into it. There was numerous multiple criteria, and unfortunately, no matter how much I try to stand up and be tall, geo only has a small say in things. One of the final parts of that comment was, wouldn't it make sense to target the higher levels of service where the geotech's better? And that's exactly what we've done. The worst hazard susceptibility is along the Kinapuru Road from the turn-off to the heads, and hence why was classified some of that as essential repairs or the next level up. It's just basically, it's the most difficult area to keep up a high level, a good level of service for, compared to some, compared to some areas heading at the French Pass, where road cuts and geology particularly normally performs a bit better, that does in Kinapuru. Hope that kind of answers the question.
Like, I might just add to that, Ken, overriding was the strategic themes from the National Adaptation Plan in terms of protect, accommodate, retreat, and avoid in terms of hazards. And we looked at that both at an area level, but also down to a segment, which is like a node to a node in terms of location to location, and that will also, in terms of the strategies, thinking about what are appropriate strategies on a site by site, understanding what the likely types of interventions might be needed. So a local retreat at a site area might be that we're able to move the road over a little bit, or we're able to get away with a single lane road safely, might be a retreat example. Avoid is kind of more towards the alternative route option. So we had to balance up at both a network and then a road segment, node to node, and then site by site. And there may be some road segments where there are good areas of road that we could build resilience into, but there may also be parts of that segment which are really, really difficult to build resilience into. So strategically, it may have been better value for money investing in some of those resilience improvement on other road segments where you could get a better return on that connection. So it was a little bit of an art plus science to balance those technical factors and developing the strategies that Ken is talking to there. I hope that helps as well answer why in some areas maybe the geo looked good, but why didn't you put in a strengthen whereas we did in other areas, and there may be some, for example, key routes where there isn't really a marine alternative and there is challenging geology, but we would like to strengthen that route, for example, to a Kiwi from State Highway 6.
Thanks, Andrew. Just drawing people's attention as well to the information on the website. So I showed you earlier there's some more supporting documents which goes into some of those other factors that were considered as well. So there is there. We're approaching 7 o'clock. We've got 3 more questions, one from Greg, one from Susan, one from Faye and Tony. So we'll answer those and then I'll finish up just with a couple more slides and we'll be ready to go at 7. So,
how well reliant to be able to service the local power cable in a hazard adaptation scenario when the power cable runs along Kinapuru Road?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, we're talking to Marlborough Lines as part of the project. So they're very interested in what their level of service is as well. So again, that's a technical question for them. They currently, and during the time of the storm, they had to use other ways than the road to maintain their network, which was more expensive for them. But they are obviously keen to try and use the road where they can. So we are engaging with them, but that really is a question for them around what their options are in terms of maintenance.
Will public travel via water taxi be subsidised?
Kind of covered that earlier, so we don't. It's too early to say, but subsidy will be part of the package that will go up. But again, I did mention that Whakakotahi currently don't in the long term subsidise water travel, so that will be a government decision as to whether they're able to do that, either Whakakotahi or another one that we're if that's something that is going to be required, it's something that either the government would help us contribute to, or Marlborough ratepayers would have to pay, with probably a mix, of course, with the user pays as it is at the moment.
Cool. I think this has been covered off previously as well, but can we just confirm the major slips between like what I will be reviewed?
Yes, they will be repaired. That doesn't mean they will go back as 2 lanes that they were previously. Probably will end up as single lane sections.
Cool. Yes, there's one more there which really talks about decisions. So I did cover that earlier. So I outlined a process which could take up to a year around decisions on levels of service and what any targeted rates would be. So that's both a combination of what the Kotahi's acceptance of the business case and council's consultation with the community about a package that is going to put together to fund its part of the repairs. So that will include, of course, the total cost. So that will be both in terms of user charges as well as the rates on the whole district. So it could take up to a year between now and then once we get through the implementation process that I described earlier. So that's the end of the questions. I really appreciate your patience. I know it's taken a while to get through those. If you're coming to any of the sessions, you may have opportunity to speak to the team coming up. I'll just share the screen to finish off as to how you can stay in touch with what we're doing. So it's a long share. Yes. Okay, so a recording of this webinar will be placed on the council website. I've shown you already where the information is being held on our website. Hopefully many of you are connected already to council's updates on the Marlborough Sounds project, both in terms of the immediate recovery and the future access. You can go on the website to do that. The email address there for the project, so you can email queries through to there, and one of the team will try and get back to you on that. In the next couple of days, we'll be busy with community meetings out in Rye and Nelson and in Picton. We'll get back to you. So, and just a final plug, really, please do complete that survey and please tell others about the information as well. So we're really keen for people to have their say, as many as possible, so the best information can be put into the final first business case. That's all from us. Thank you very much to the team for supporting the webinar and answering the questions. Thanks to everybody for participating. We really appreciate your time. And we will continue to stay in touch about the progress of this project. Thank you.